My mom told my 7-year-old that Santa doesn't come to houses with secrets. I didn't know that yet, though. What I knew was my daughter standing in my bedroom doorway holding her stuffed rabbit by one ear, and the way her voice sounded small and careful, like she'd been crying but didn't want me to know. She asked if Santa was still coming this year. I put my phone down and something cold started spreading in my stomach. Not panic yet, but that feeling right before panic, where your body knows something's wrong, but your brain hasn't caught up. I asked her what she meant, and she twisted the rabbit's ear between her fingers and wouldn't look at me. She said Grandma told her Santa doesn't come to houses with secrets. I heard the words, but they didn't make sense yet, like when someone speaks and you have to replay it in your head to understand what they actually said. I asked her what secrets, and she said she didn't know. Grandma just said we had them now, and Santa knows. My hands went numb, and I realized I was gripping my phone too hard. I asked when Grandma said that, and she said last week when they went for cookies. Last week, I'd let my mom take both kids for an afternoon because I thought it would be nice, and I needed to run errands without managing meltdowns in the grocery store. My mom sent me a picture around too with both of them at her kitchen table, decorating gingerbread, flour on their hands, big smiles. I'd looked at that picture and felt relieved that maybe things were okay between us, that maybe she was letting go of whatever judgment she'd been holding. But apparently while I wasn't there, she told my daughter that Santa might not come this year because our house had changed, because we weren't the same family anymore, because there were things we weren't proud of. My daughter didn't say all of that at once, and I had to ask her to repeat it because she kept starting and stopping like she wasn't sure she was allowed to tell me. Like maybe this was another secret she was supposed to keep. And the worst part, the thing that made my chest feel like it was caving in, was that she believed it. She thought Santa was going to skip our house because of something I did. I pulled her onto the bed, and my voice came out steadier than I felt, told her Santa was definitely coming, that Grandma was wrong, that there were no secrets and nothing to be ashamed of. But I could see it in her face that she wanted to believe me but wasn't sure, because it came from Grandma, and Grandma doesn't lie. Grandma's the one who taught her about stranger danger and looking both ways, and telling the truth. I sat there holding her, and my brain was trying to organize what I was feeling, but it wouldn't organize. It just kept circling back to the image of my mom sitting at that kitchen table with my daughter, saying those words while they decorated cookies, using Santa, using Christmas, using the one thing a 7-year-old believes in without question. My daughter asked if we could make cookies for Santa like we used to, her voice so hopeful and scared at the same time. And I said yes, of course we could, absolutely. She nodded, but her eyes were still worried, and I wanted to grab my phone and call my mom right then. But I couldn't, not with my daughter watching me, not when I needed her to believe everything was fine. After she went back to her room, I just sat there on my bed staring at the wall. The ceiling fan was making that clicking sound it always makes, and I kept counting the clicks, trying to ground myself in something that wasn't the sick, spreading feeling in my stomach. I kept replaying what my daughter said, trying to make it make sense. Houses with secrets. We weren't the same family anymore. Things we weren't proud of. Maybe she misunderstood. Kids do that. They hear one thing and internalize it as something else. They take general statements and make them personal. Maybe my mom was talking about families in general, about values or consequences or something abstract, and my daughter applied it to us because that's what kids do when they're already anxious about change. But then why would Santa even come up? Why would my mom be talking about Santa not coming at all unless she was making a point, unless she wanted my daughter to feel scared? I picked up my phone and texted my sister, asked if Mom had said anything to her about me, about the kids, about Christmas. Then I just stared at the screen waiting for the 3 dots to appear. My son came in wanting to know what was for dinner, and I said mac and cheese. Then I got up and went to the kitchen like nothing was wrong. I filled the pot with water, and my hands were shaking, so I had to set it down carefully so it wouldn't slosh. While the water heated, I stood there watching it, not thinking about anything, just watching the bubbles start to form on the bottom of the pot. I made dinner and we sat at the table, and my son talked about his day at school, something about a frog they saw at recess. And my daughter was quiet, pushing her mac and cheese around her plate. I asked if she was okay, and she said yes, but she didn't eat much. That night after I put them to bed, I sat on the couch in the dark, because turning on the lamp felt like too much effort, and I tried to figure out what to do. I could call my mom and ask her what happened, but I wasn't ready to hear the answer yet, wasn't ready to find out if she'd really done this on purpose, because what kind of person uses Santa to scare a 7-year-old? What kind of grandmother weaponizes Christmas? But maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was so on edge about everything, so sensitive about the divorce and the dating and my mom's judgment that I was seeing attacks where there weren't any. My phone lit up around 10, and it was my sister texting back saying Mom had mentioned me a few times lately, that she seemed worried, that she didn't think I was handling things well. I stared at that text and my stomach dropped again. I asked what that meant, and she said Mom thought I was moving too fast, that I wasn't focused on the kids, that I was making decisions without thinking them through. I didn't know what decisions she meant. Or maybe I did and didn't want to admit it. I asked if Mom had said anything about the person I was seeing, and my sister said yes, she'd heard about it, and Mom wasn't happy. I turned off my phone and sat there in the dark, with the only light coming from the kitchen where I'd left the overhead on. The divorce had been final for a whole year, and I'd spent most of that year just trying to survive. Getting the kids to school on time. Making sure they ate vegetables sometimes. Making sure they knew none of this was their fault, that Mom and Dad both loved them, that the separation had nothing to do with them. Some days I barely made it through, just counted down the hours until bedtime so I could sit in the quiet and not have to be strong anymore. But we were doing okay now. We had routines. We had movie nights and pancake Saturdays, and on a life that felt like ours, not like the broken pieces of something else. And I'd been so careful about dating, so careful. I didn't introduce anyone to the kids, didn't bring anyone to the house, didn't even talk about it in front of them. I was just trying to have one thing that was mine, one part of my life that wasn't about being a mom or an ex-wife or someone who failed at marriage. Just something normal. Something that felt like the person I used to be before everything got so heavy. But apparently that was too much. Or maybe it wasn't too much, and I was being defensive because my mom had always had opinions about my life, always thought she knew better, always had that tone like she was trying to help, but really she was just disappointed. I thought about my daughter's face, the way she'd asked about Santa, and I started wondering if my mom had planned it, if she'd invited them over specifically to say things she wouldn't say in front of me. I didn't want to believe it, but the feeling wouldn't go away. Though maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was so raw about everything that I was seeing manipulation where there was just worry, seeing malice where there was just concern. I didn't know. I sat there in the dark and didn't know. My mom didn't approve of the divorce from the beginning, though she didn't say it directly at first. Just made these comments about how marriage takes work, and people give up too easily now, and kids need stability. I tried to ignore it. My ex and I had tried for 2 years, really tried, with counseling and compromises and late-night conversations that went in circles and never landed anywhere. We just weren't right for each other, and staying wasn't going to fix that. It was just going to make us both miserable, and eventually the kids would feel it. But my mom didn't want to hear that. When I told her we were separating, she asked what I'd done, like it had to be my fault, like there had to be something I could fix. I told her it was both of us, that we just weren't compatible anymore, and she said that was an excuse, that marriage wasn't about compatibility, it was about commitment. I didn't argue because I was too tired and because I knew she wouldn't hear me anyway. She'd already decided what the problem was. I hung up and sat on my couch and stared at my hands for I don't know how long, maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour, replaying the conversation and trying to figure out why it hurt so much when I'd known exactly what she was going to say. After the divorce was final, she got colder, but not all at once, just gradually, like the temperature dropping so slowly, you don't notice until you're already freezing. At first she still called regularly, still asked how I was doing, still offered to watch the kids. But then the questions started changing, started feeling less like concern and more like surveillance. She'd ask if I was getting enough sleep, if I was keeping up with the house, if the kids seemed okay. Then she'd add these little observations about how my daughter seemed quieter lately, about how my son was having more tantrums, about how they probably missed having their dad around full time. Nothing direct, nothing I could argue with. Just small suggestions that maybe things weren't as fine as I kept saying. My mom has always been big on appearances, on what people think, on making sure everything looks right even if it isn't. She's the kind of person who brings a dish to church potlucks even when she's overwhelmed because that's what good Christians do. She volunteers at the library every Tuesday and has for 15 years. She sends birthday cards exactly 1 week early so they arrive on time. And I think maybe the divorce embarrassed her, not because of me, but because of what it said about her. Like if her daughter couldn't make a marriage work then, maybe she'd failed somehow. Maybe people would think she didn't raise me right. I remember one time she came over to drop off groceries. This was maybe 3 months after the divorce, and she walked through the living room and saw toys everywhere. Dishes in the sink, laundry folded but still sitting on the couch because I hadn't had time to put it away. She didn't say anything, but her face did that thing where her mouth gets tight and her eyes kind of scan the room like she's cataloging everything. Then she asked if I needed help getting organized. I told her I was fine, that it had been a long week, and she said of course, but maybe I should think about getting on a better schedule for the kids' sake, that routine was important for children during transitions. After she left, I sat on that couch surrounded by unfolded laundry, and I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the room was getting smaller. I wondered if she was right, if I was failing, if the mess meant I was falling apart. It got worse after I started seeing someone. His name was Aaron, and I met him through a friend at work who thought we'd get along. We went for coffee first, and he made me laugh, really laugh, the kind where you forget to be self-conscious. He was a middle school science teacher, and he talked about his students with this warmth that reminded me why I used to like people before everything got so hard. We'd been on maybe 5 dates, always during the day when the kids were at school, or in the evening when they were with their dad. And I hadn't told anyone because I wanted to keep it separate, keep it mine. But one night my mom called and asked if I was seeing someone. The question caught me off guard, and I hesitated too long before saying yes. There was this silence on the other end that felt like it lasted forever. Then she asked if I thought that was a good idea right now. I said I didn't know, but I was trying to figure it out. And she said the kids didn't need more confusion, that I should be focused on them, that bringing someone new into their lives was going to hurt them. I told her I hadn't brought anyone into their lives, that Aaron didn't even know I had kids yet, that I was being careful. And she said it didn't matter. Kids always know when their mom is distracted. They feel it even if they don't see it. I wanted to tell her I wasn't distracted, that I was allowed to be a person and not just a mom, that being good at one didn't mean sacrificing the other. But I didn't. My throat got tight, and I just said I had to go. After that, the calls got more frequent, every few days asking how the kids were really doing, asking if I was managing, okay, if I needed help. But the questions felt loaded, like she was checking on me, making sure I hadn't screwed up yet. And she started making comments about the kids needing stability, about how change was hard for them, about how I needed to be careful about what I was modeling, like dating after divorce was setting some kind of bad example. I tried to brush it off, but it wore me down because part of me wondered if she was right, if I was being selfish, if I should wait longer. But then I'd look at my kids, and they seemed fine, happy even, and I'd think maybe my mom was just projecting her own feelings onto them, seeing problems that weren't there because she wanted there to be problems. I didn't know. I kept second-guessing everything. Every time my daughter was quiet, I wondered if it was because she could feel me pulling away. Every time my son had a meltdown, I wondered if he was reacting to instability I'd created. Every time I saw Aaron, I felt guilty, like I was doing something wrong, just by trying to be happy. Then one day, my mom called and asked if she could take the kids for an afternoon. Said she wanted to bake cookies with them, that it would be fun, that they could decorate gingerbread, and she'd send me pictures. I said yes because I thought it would be good for them, and because honestly, I needed a break, needed a few hours to just exist without being needed. So I dropped them off at her house, and she hugged them both, and waved at me from the porch, and everything seemed normal. She sent me a picture around 2 in the afternoon, both kids at the table, flour everywhere, smiling. I looked at that picture while I was standing in the grocery store, and felt this wave of relief, like maybe things were okay, like maybe she was letting it go. But when I picked them up that evening, something felt off. My son was fine, talking nonstop about the cookies, and how Grandma let him use all the red icing, and how he made one that looked like a dinosaur with spikes. But my daughter was quiet. I asked if she had fun, and she said yes, but she wouldn't look at me. I asked if something was wrong, and she said no. I didn't push it because I figured she was tired, or maybe she didn't want to leave. She got like that sometimes after seeing my mom, didn't want the special attention to end. But that night when I was tucking her in, she asked me something. She asked if our family was bad now. The question hit me like cold water, and I didn't understand, so I asked her what she meant. She said Grandma said families are supposed to stay together, and when they don't, it means something went wrong. My chest got tight and I asked what else Grandma said. My daughter looked at her hands and said Grandma told her that some families make mistakes and Santa knows, and he watches to see if people are sorry. I sat there on the edge of her bed and the air felt too thick to breathe. I asked if Grandma said we made a mistake and my daughter didn't answer, just looked at me with these big worried eyes, and I realized she wasn't sure. She didn't know if we had or not. I told her we didn't make a mistake, that our family was different now, but different didn't mean bad, that Santa wasn't mad at us, and neither was God or anyone else. She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. Could tell she was trying to decide who to believe. I kissed her forehead and turned off the light and stood in the hallway for a second with my hand on the doorframe. Then I went to my room and sat on the floor with my back against the bed because sitting on the bed felt too comfortable for what I was feeling. I couldn't believe my mom had done that. Couldn't believe she'd taken my kids for an afternoon and used it to make them feel ashamed. But then I started second-guessing myself because maybe my daughter really had misunderstood. Maybe my mom was trying to talk about values in general, and it came out wrong. Maybe I was reading too much into it because I was already on edge. But I kept thinking about how specific the words were. Families that stay together. Mistakes. Santa watching. Those didn't sound like accidents. I wanted to call her right then, but I needed to think first. Needed to figure out what to say, because if I called angry, she'd just get defensive. She'd say I was overreacting, that I was too sensitive, that I was hearing things that weren't there. And maybe I was. So I sat there on the floor until my legs started to go numb. Then I got up and went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep that night. Just lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation with my daughter over and over, the way she'd asked if our family was bad, the way she'd looked at me like she wasn't sure if I was telling the truth. I kept trying to separate what actually happened from what I thought happened, trying to be fair, trying not to jump to conclusion. But the more I thought about it, the less it felt like a misunderstanding. The next morning I got the kids ready for school like normal, and my daughter was still quiet, moving slower than usual, and my son was fine, chattering about something he wanted to build with Legos. I asked her if she felt okay, and she said yes, asked if she wanted to talk about anything, and she said no. I didn't push. After I dropped them off, I sat in the car in the school parking lot, because I knew I needed to call my mom, but I didn't know what to say yet, didn't know if I should be calm or angry or just on it. I kept rehearsing it in my head, trying out different versions. Mom, we need to talk about what you said to the kids. No, too formal. Why would you scare my daughter like that? Too accusatory. Can you help me understand what happened? Too soft. None of them felt right. I texted Aaron instead, told him something happened with my mom, that I needed to deal with it, that I might not be around much for the next few days. He wrote back immediately saying he understood, and he was here if I needed to talk. I appreciated that, but I didn't want to talk to him about it yet. Didn't want to admit that my own mother was undermining me. Or maybe she wasn't, and I was being paranoid. I went home and tried to work because I had a report due, but I couldn't focus. Kept reading the same paragraph over and over without absorbing it. Kept checking my phone like maybe my mom would text first. Like maybe she'd realize what she'd done and apologize. But she didn't. Around noon, I finally called her, and she answered on the third ring, sounding cheerful, normal, like nothing was wrong. She asked how I was doing. I said I was fine. Then I said we needed to talk about what she said to my daughter. There was a pause, and I could hear her TV in the background, one of those daytime talk shows she always has on. Then she asked what I meant. I told her about the secrets, about Santa, about my daughter, asking if our family was bad. My mom was quiet for a second, then said she didn't say it like that, her voice already getting defensive. I asked how she did say it, and she started explaining that she was just trying to help my daughter understand that actions have consequences, that families are supposed to stay together, that when they don't, it's because someone made a choice, someone decided their own happiness mattered more. I was standing in my kitchen and my hand was gripping the phone so hard my knuckles were white. I asked if she really said that to a 7-year-old, and she said she was just being honest, that kids need to understand the truth, that I couldn't protect them from reality forever. I told her she scared my daughter, that my daughter was crying, that she thought Santa wasn't coming because of something I did. My mom said that wasn't her intention, that kids are sensitive, that maybe my daughter was already feeling confused. And this was just how it came out. Like the anxiety was already there, and my mom just happened to be the person it surfaced around. I said no. This came out because you put it in her head, and my voice was shaking now. She got defensive and said she would never intentionally hurt her grandchildren, that she loved them, that everything she does is because she cares, that maybe I was too close to the situation to see it clearly. I asked what she meant, and she said I was the one who made this choice. I was the one who decided to end my marriage, and now I was upset that my daughter was having feelings about it. My whole body went cold. I told her I did think about other people, that I thought about my kids every single day, that staying in a marriage that wasn't working wouldn't have been better for them. And she said that was my opinion, that plenty of people make marriages work when it's hard, that commitment means staying even when you're unhappy. I said it was my life, and she said it was their life too, that I made a decision that affected them, that maybe I should have thought harder about what I was giving up. I wanted to hang up, wanted to scream. But I also wanted her to understand, wanted her to see what she was doing, wanted her to take it back. I took a breath and told her she couldn't see the kids for a while, that I needed space to figure this out. She said I was overreacting, that I was being dramatic, that this was exactly the kind of thing that happens when people make selfish decisions. They can't handle being questioned. I told her this conversation was over, and I hung up. Then I just stood there in my kitchen with the phone still in my hand, and my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I kept waiting to feel better, like hanging up would release the pressure. But it didn't. Because I just cut my mom off from my kids, and I didn't know if I was doing the right thing or making everything worse, if I was protecting them or overreacting to something that didn't deserve this much weight. I called my sister and told her everything, the whole conversation, what Mom said to my daughter, what just happened on the phone. And she was quiet for a long time, so long I thought maybe the call had dropped. Then she said she wasn't surprised. I asked what that meant, and she said Mom had been saying things for a while, about me, about the divorce, about how I was handling it. She said Mom thought I was being reckless, that I was putting myself first, that the kids were going to suffer for it, that I was making the same mistakes our cousin made, and look how that turned out. I didn't even know what cousin she was talking about, but I didn't ask. I asked if my sister agreed with her, and she hesitated, then said no. But she understood why Mom felt that way, that divorce was hard for the whole family, that Mom was probably just worried. I asked if she thought I was overreacting, and she said she didn't know, that maybe Mom didn't mean it the way it sounded, that tone gets lost sometimes, that maybe I should give her a chance to apologize. I said she already had a chance and she didn't take it. She just defended herself. My sister sighed and said she'd talk to Mom, see if she could get her to understand. I said okay, but I didn't think it would help, because my mom didn't think she was wrong. She thought I was. The next few days I felt like I was moving underwater, like everything was muffled and slow and required twice as much effort as it should. My daughter kept asking questions about Santa, and I kept reassuring her, but I could tell she was still worried. Could see it in the way she'd stop in the middle of playing and just stare at nothing. She'd ask things like if Santa could see inside houses, if he knew when people were lying, if he could tell when families were different. And I kept telling her Santa loved her, that he was coming no matter what, that nothing had changed. But she didn't believe me, not fully, and I could see her trying to figure out who was telling the truth, me or Grandma. My son started acting out too, though he didn't know exactly what had happened, just that something was wrong. He got clingy, wouldn't let me out of his sight, started having meltdowns over little things like the wrong color cup or his socks feeling weird. One night he wouldn't go to bed without me sitting with him, and I sat there on the floor next to his bed for over an hour, while he kept asking me to check for monsters, to leave the door open wider, to turn the nightlight up. And I knew he wasn't scared of monsters. He was scared of something he couldn't name. He asked why we didn't see Grandma anymore, and I said we were taking a break, that sometimes grown-ups need space. He asked if Grandma was mad at us, and I said no, not at you, and he said at you? I didn't answer, and he rolled over to face the wall. I tried to keep everything normal, but I was barely holding it together. I wasn't sleeping, just lying in bed replaying the phone call, trying to figure out what I should have said differently, trying to figure out if I was the problem. I'd fall asleep around 4 in the morning and wake up at 6 feeling like I hadn't slept at all. I started forgetting things, Little things like where I put my keys or whether I'd locked the door, but also bigger things like a dentist appointment for my son that I completely spaced on until they called to ask where we were. At work, I missed a deadline, and my boss pulled me aside, asked if everything was okay at home. I said yes, just a lot going on, and she said to let her know if I needed anything. I said I would, but I didn't even know what I needed, just wanted my mom to understand, and she wasn't going to. I started having these moments where I'd just stop, like I'd be loading the dishwasher or folding laundry, and I'd freeze with my hands full, staring at nothing, and I couldn't remember what I was supposed to be doing. The coffee maker had been beeping for I don't know how long one morning before I realized I'd walked away without getting my cup. My body felt heavy, like I was dragging weights. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning and lie there staring at the dark ceiling, and my brain would start spinning, replaying the conversation with my mom, replaying my daughter's face, trying to figure out if I was making this harder than it needed to be, if I was the one being unreasonable. 3 days after our phone call, my sister called me and said she'd talked to Mom, that Mom was upset, that she felt like I was being unfair, that she was just trying to be a good grandmother. I asked if she apologized, and my sister said sort of, that Mom said she didn't mean to upset the kids, that maybe she could have phrased things differently. My chest tightened, and I asked if she admitted she was wrong. My sister hesitated. Then she said no, not exactly, just that she wished I could see she was coming from a place of love. I said that's what I thought, and my sister said maybe I should reach out, that maybe if I made the first move Mom would come around, that someone had to break the stalemate. I felt this surge of frustration because why did I have to make the first move when I wasn't the one who used Santa to scare a 7-year-old, when I wasn't the one who weaponized Christmas? But I didn't say that, just said I wasn't ready yet. My sister said she understood, but this was going to get harder if we didn't fix it soon, that the holidays were coming, that the kids were going to notice, that family gatherings were going to be awkward. I said I knew, but I didn't know how to fix it, didn't know how to make her understand without her getting defensive, without her making it about me being too sensitive or reading into things. Because fixing it meant pretending it didn't happen, or pretending it wasn't that bad. And I couldn't do that. My sister said she'd keep trying, and I said okay, then we hung up and I sat on my couch in the quiet house because the kids were at school, and I realized I was crying, but I didn't know when I'd start. That afternoon, I was driving home from picking up groceries, and I had to pull over because my hands started shaking so bad I couldn't hold the steering wheel steady. I sat there in a random parking lot with the engine running and cars going by, and I tried to breathe, but my chest felt like it was in a vice. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe 20. Eventually, my phone rang, and it was Aaron, and I answered without thinking. He asked how I was, and I said fine, automatically, and he said you don't sound fine. And I just broke. I told him about the phone call with my sister, about feeling like I was losing my mind, about everyone acting like I was the problem, like I was making this bigger than it was, like I should just get over it. He listened without interrupting, and when I was done, he asked what I wanted to do. I said I didn't know, and he asked if I thought my mom was going to apologize. Really apologize. Not just say she didn't mean to upset anyone. I said no, probably not. He asked if I could forgive her without an apology. I said I didn't know, and he said that was okay, that I didn't have to know yet, that I didn't have to have everything figured out. Then he said something that stuck with me. He said it sounded like I was asking myself the wrong question. I asked what he meant, and he said I kept asking if I was overreacting, if I was being too sensitive, if I was making it worse. But those weren't the right questions. The question was whether what my mom did was okay, and whether I wanted my kids around someone who would do that, intentionally or not. And when he put it that way, the answer felt clear. No, I didn't. After we hung up, I felt a little steadier, not better, but like I could see the ground again, like I wasn't just spinning in the dark anymore. I drove home and made dinner, and helped my son with his homework, and read my daughter a story, and for a few hours, I didn't think about my mom at all. But that night after the kids were asleep, I almost called her. I had my phone in my hand, and her name pulled up, and I kept staring at it, telling myself to just do it, just call her and say we could work it out, that I forgave her, that we could move past this. It would be so much easier. The kids would be happy. My mom would be happy. My sister would stop calling immediately. And I wouldn't have to keep carrying this weight. But I kept thinking about my daughter's face, the way she'd asked if our family was bad, and I couldn't do it. In what way, you what? I put the phone down and went to bed. The week before Christmas was the hardest because I was trying to make everything feel normal for the kids, but nothing felt normal, and I was so tired I could barely think straight. My daughter was still asking about Santa, still worried, still watching me like she was trying to figure out if I was lying. And my son was having meltdowns every day over nothing, over everything, melting down because his toast was cut wrong, or because his favorite shirt was in the wash. And I was barely functioning. I'd make dinner for the kids and then forget to eat myself, would find myself standing in the kitchen at midnight staring into the fridge, trying to remember if I'd had dinner, if I'd had lunch, if I'd eaten anything at all that day. The headaches started around then, the kind that started behind my eyes and spread until my whole skull felt like it was being crushed. I'd take ibuprofen, and it wouldn't touch them, would take more and still feel that pounding pressure that made it hard to focus, hard to think. One morning I was so tired I put the milk in the pantry instead of the fridge, and didn't realize until that night when I went to make the kids cereal and couldn't find it. My daughter found it, and asked why it was in the cupboard, holding the warm jug like it was evidence of something. I said I must have been distracted, and she looked at me with this worried expression and asked if I was okay. I said yes, just tired. But I wasn't okay, and I think she knew it. The next day my mom texted saying she wanted to drop off presents for the kids, that she didn't want them to feel forgotten on Christmas, that they were her grandchildren, and she had a right to give them gifts. I stared at that text for a long time because part of me wanted to say no, to tell her to stay away, to not let her use presents as a way back in. But part of me felt guilty because the kids didn't do anything wrong and they loved their grandma, and keeping them from her felt cruel, like I was punishing them to punish her. I kept reading the text over and over, trying to decide what to do. Finally, I texted back and said she could drop them off, but I wasn't ready to see her yet. She wrote back, fine. 2 days later, there were boxes on the porch, wrapped perfectly with elaborate bows, the kind my mom always does with the ribbon curled just right. The kids' names were written in her handwriting on little tags. No note, no card, just the presents. I brought them inside and put them under the tree, and my daughter saw them right away, asked if they were from Grandma. I said yes, and she asked if Grandma was coming for Christmas. I said no, not this year. She asked why, and I said because we needed space right now, that sometimes people need time apart to figure things out. She asked if it was because of her, because of what she told me. I pulled her close and told her no, that it had nothing to do with her, that this was between me and Grandma, that she didn't do anything wrong. She nodded, but I could tell she didn't really believe me, could tell she was carrying this weight that wasn't hers to carry. My son asked when we'd see Grandma again, and I said I didn't know. Maybe soon. He asked if we could call her, and I said maybe after Christmas. He seemed okay with that, but my daughter just looked at those presents like they were some kind of test. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat on the floor next to the tree and looked at those perfectly wrapped boxes, and I felt so tired, bone-deep exhausted, the kind where you can't remember what it feels like to not be tired. I didn't want to be angry anymore, didn't want to keep fighting, didn't want to keep explaining myself to people who wouldn't listen. I just wanted my mom to understand. But she wasn't going to, and I had to figure out how to be okay with that. I thought about calling her, just to hear her voice, just to feel like we were still connected. But I knew it wouldn't help, knew she'd say the same things, and I'd say the same things, and nothing would change. So I just sat there in the dark looking at the tree lights, those little white ones we'd strung up together, the kids and me, and tried to accept that this was how it was going to be. Christmas morning, I woke up early and made coffee and sat on the couch in the dark, trying to feel ready, trying to convince myself I could make this good for them. The kids were excited when they woke up, my son especially because he'd been counting down for weeks. My daughter was quieter, but she still wanted to open presents, still wanted it to feel like Christmas. I made pancakes and put on music and tried to make it special. We opened presents and the kids loved everything. They played, they laughed. My son got a remote control car and drove it around the living room for an hour making crashing sounds. My daughter got art supplies and set up at the kitchen table and started drawing immediately. It almost felt normal. Except my mom wasn't there and I could feel the absence of her. Not just for me, but for the kids too, this empty space where she should have been. Every other Christmas she'd been here. She'd make cinnamon rolls from scratch, would sit on the floor with them and help them open presents, would take a million pictures and send them to the whole family. And now she wasn't. My daughter kept looking at the presents from Grandma, kept touching them, picking them up and putting them down like she was trying to feel connected to her somehow. Around 10, she asked if we could call and say, "Thank you," and I said maybe later, that Grandma might be busy. She said Grandma would want to know we liked them, and I said I knew. She didn't push, but I could tell it was bothering her. Around noon, my phone rang, and it was my mom. I stared at it, debated not answering, but I picked up. I said hello, and she said Merry Christmas, and I said it back. There was this long silence, and I could hear people talking in the background, probably my aunt and uncle at her house. Then she asked if the kids liked their presents. I said they did, that they were playing with them right now, and she said good, that she'd picked them out carefully, that she'd thought about what they'd like. I said thank you. Another silence. Then she said she missed us, that it didn't feel like Christmas without the kids, that the house felt empty. I didn't know what to say, so I just said I knew. She started talking then and about how she'd been thinking about everything. How maybe she didn't say it the right way, but her heart was in the right place, that she was just worried about them, that she wanted them to understand that choices have consequences, that she couldn't just stand by and watch me make mistakes without saying something. She kept circling back to how I'd ended my marriage, how that affected the kids, how I needed to think about them instead of myself. I listened without interrupting, but I could feel myself shutting down, could feel that familiar numbness spreading. When she finished, I told her I understood she was worried, but that what she said to my daughter wasn't okay, that she scared her, that she made her feel ashamed of something that wasn't her fault. She said that wasn't what she meant to do, that she was just being honest, and I said it didn't matter what she meant. It mattered what happened. She got quiet. Then she said maybe I was right, that she could have said it differently, but the message itself wasn't wrong, that kids need to understand the world doesn't revolve around what makes their parents happy, that sometimes parents make selfish choices and kids have to live with that. Something broke inside me. I told her I had to go. She said wait, that we weren't done talking. And I said yes we were. And I hung up. I sat there on the couch and couldn't move. My hands were shaking again and my heart was pounding, and I felt like I might throw up. I put my phone down and went to check on the kids, and they were still playing, completely oblivious. My son crashing his car into the couch, and my daughter coloring with headphones on. My daughter looked up and asked if I was okay, and I said yes, just tired. She asked if we could watch a movie, and I said yes, absolutely. And we spent the rest of the day on the couch watching movies and eating popcorn and just being together. And it was good. Not perfect, but good. The day after Christmas, I was in the kitchen making lunch when I heard a car in the driveway and looked out the window to see my mom getting out, walking up to the porch. My heart started pounding, and I opened the door before she could knock and asked what she was doing here. She said she wanted to see the kids just for a few minutes, that she'd brought them something else, holding a bag. I told her I'd said I needed time, and she said it had been time, that it was Christmas, that she couldn't stay away anymore, that this was ridiculous. I felt my chest get tight and told her now wasn't a good time, that I'd asked for space and she needed to respect that. She said when would be a good time, that I kept putting her off, that I was being unreasonable, that I was keeping her grandchildren from her over nothing. I said it wasn't nothing, and she said it was, that I was blowing this out of proportion, that I was using the kids to punish her. I told her she needed to leave, and she said I was being cruel, that one day I'd regret this. I said maybe, but right now I need you to go. She stood there for a second, her face tight, then she turned around and walked back to her car without saying anything else. I closed the door and leaned against it with my hands shaking, and I heard footsteps behind me. My daughter was standing there looking at me, and she asked who that was. I opened my mouth to say no one, but I stopped, because she'd seen the car. She probably saw Grandma. I said it was Grandma, but she couldn't stay. My daughter asked why, and I said because we're still figuring things out, that sometimes even people we love have to respect our rules, that boundaries are important. She asked what boundaries meant, and I said it means protecting yourself, protecting the people you love, even if it makes other people mad. She was quiet for a second, processing. Then she asked if Grandma was mad. I said maybe, but that it was okay. That sometimes doing the right thing makes people mad, and that doesn't mean you're wrong. She nodded slowly like she was trying to understand. Then she asked if I was okay. I said yes, I would be. She came over and hugged me, and I held her for a long time, feeling her small body against mine, and I thought maybe I was doing this right after all. After she went back to her room, I called my sister and I was crying. I couldn't help it. She asked what happened and I told her about the call on Christmas, about Mom showing up, about how she still didn't get it, still thought I was the problem. My sister was quiet for a long time. Then she said she was sorry, that she didn't know it was this bad, that she'd been trying to stay neutral, but maybe that wasn't fair to me. I said it felt impossible, and she asked what I was going to do. I said I didn't know, but I couldn't keep doing this. Couldn't keep letting my mom push my boundaries just because she thought she was right. My sister didn't argue. She asked if I wanted her to talk to Mom again, and I said no, that it wouldn't help, that Mom had to decide for herself whether this relationship mattered enough to change. My sister said she understood. Then she said something that surprised me. She said she was proud of me for holding the line, for not backing down, that it takes guts to set boundaries with family. I asked if she thought I was doing the right thing, and she said yes, even though it was hard, that sometimes the right thing is the hard thing. I said it was really hard, and she said she knew that she'd support me however this went. After we hung up, I went and sat with the kids and we played a board game, one of those long ones that takes forever, and we made hot chocolate with extra marshmallows and just existed together. And for a little while, I stopped thinking about my mom, stopped wondering if I was doing the right thing. I just focused on them, on keeping them safe, on keeping them happy, on being the parent they needed. The next few weeks were quiet, and it felt strange, like waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. I didn't hear from my mom, didn't hear from my aunt, didn't hear from anyone in the family except my sister, who checked in a few times to see how I was holding up. New Year's came and went, and I spent it with the kids making homemade pizza, the kind where you stretch the dough yourself, and they put whatever toppings they want. My son made one that was basically just cheese and pepperoni covering every inch. My daughter made hers with olives arranged in a smiley face. We watched the countdown on TV, and they fell asleep before midnight, curled up on the couch with blankets. I stayed up and watched the bowl drop alone in the quiet and thought about the year ahead, about whether this was sustainable, whether I could really keep my mom at arm's length forever, or if eventually I'd cave because it was easier. I didn't know yet. It's been 6 months now, and my mom and I talk occasionally, not often, maybe once every few weeks. Surface level stuff. How are the kids? How's work? Amora. Did you see that thing on the news? She's seen them a handful of times, short visits, always with me there. The first visit was 3 months after Christmas when she texted and asked if she could come by just for an hour, that she wouldn't push, she just wanted to see them. I said yes. She brought coloring books and sat on the floor with them and asked about school. Didn't bring up the divorce, didn't bring up Aaron, didn't say anything about Santa or consequences or any of it. She was careful, polite, almost formal. And I realized that's probably what it was going to be from now on. This careful distance where we both walked on eggshells and nobody said what they were really thinking. My daughter asked me later why Grandma seemed different, and I said sometimes people change, sometimes relationships change. She asked if Grandma was still mad, and I said I didn't think so, but we were still figuring things out. She seemed okay with that, though I could tell she missed the version of Grandma who wasn't careful, who just loved her without all this weight between us. The second visit was easier. We met at a park and the kids played while my mom and I sat on a bench watching them. She asked how I was doing and I said, okay. And she said the kids looked happy, and I said they were. We didn't talk about what happened, didn't talk about the boundaries, didn't acknowledge the elephant sitting between us. We just sat there and watched the kids play. At one point, my son fell off the monkey bars and my mom started to get up, but I was already moving, was already there scooping him up and checking for scrapes. He was fine, more scared than hurt, and I carried him back to the bench where my mom was sitting. She asked if he was okay, and I said yes, just startled. She reached out like she wanted to touch him but pulled back, asked if she could get him ice cream to make him feel better. I said sure. We walked to the ice cream truck together, the 5 of us, and for a few minutes it almost felt normal, like we were just a family at the park on a Saturday. But then we went back to the bench and the careful distance settled in again. Before we left, my mom asked if we could do this again soon, and I said, maybe, we'd see. And I meant it because I wasn't trying to keep her away forever. I was just trying to keep my kids safe, and if she could be around them without using them to get at me, then we could figure something out. But I wasn't letting my guard down. Aaron and I are still together, and it's been almost 8 months now. Wow! The kids have met him. They like him. He's good with them, doesn't try too hard, just treats them like people. My daughter asked me a few weeks ago if Aaron was going to live with us someday, and I said maybe, but not yet, that we were taking things slow. She said okay, and then asked if Grandma knew about him. I said yes, and she asked if Grandma liked him. I said I didn't know. She thought about that, chewing her bottom lip the way she does when she's working something out. Then she said it didn't matter as long as I liked him. And something about the way she said it made me realize she'd grown up a little, that she understood things weren't simple, that people could disagree and still be okay, that love didn't mean agreeing about everything. Last month, my mom sent me a card, just a random Tuesday, no occasion. Inside, she wrote that she was thinking about me, that she hoped I was doing well, that she loved me. She didn't apologize, didn't say she was wrong, but it felt like something, like maybe she was trying in the only way she knew how. I kept the card on my kitchen counter for a week, and I'd see it every morning when I made coffee. Finally, I sent her a text saying thank you for the card, that I appreciated it. She wrote back and said she was glad I got it, that she meant what she said. That was it. But it was something. My mom and I probably won't ever be as close as we used to be, because there's this distance now that wasn't there before, this awareness that she's capable of hurting me, of using my kids as leverage, and I can't unknow that. Some days it makes me sad. I miss her. I miss the version of her from before the divorce, the mom who showed up when I needed her, who brought groceries without being asked, who made everything feel manageable. Other days I feel relieved, like I don't have to carry the weight of her judgment anymore, don't have to second-guess every decision wondering what she'll think. My daughter hasn't asked about Santa since January, and now she's already planning what cookies we're going to make next Christmas, talking about gingerbread and sugar cookies shaped like trees. No fear in her voice, no guilt. My son doesn't remember much about any of it. He just knows Grandma comes to visit sometimes, and it's nice when she does, but it's also nice when it's just us. They're okay. We're okay. At my daughter's last parent-teacher conference, her teacher pulled me aside and said she'd noticed a shift, that my daughter seemed lighter lately, less anxious, more willing to take risks in class. I asked what she meant, and she said earlier in the year my daughter would shut down when she made mistakes, would cry over small things, but lately she'd been more resilient, more confident. I didn't tell her what had happened with my mom, but I wondered if maybe holding that boundary, protecting her from that weight, had given her space to just be a kid again. Okay, doesn't have to mean perfect. Protecting my kids sometimes means protecting them from people I love. That's the thing nobody tells you about being a parent, that sometimes the hardest choices aren't between good and bad. They're between bad and worse, between guilt and safety, between keeping the peace and keeping your kids okay. I wanted my mom to apologize, to understand, to be the grandmother my kids deserved without me having to manage every interaction. But that's not what happened, and I had to accept that. I had to accept that she might never think she was wrong, that she might always believe she was just trying to help, that in her mind, she was the one being punished for caring. And I had to decide that my kids' well-being mattered more than keeping the peace, more than family harmony, more than my mom's feelings. That was the hard part. Not the anger, not the boundaries, not the phone calls or the showing up or the careful visits. The acceptance. Accepting that this is who she is, that I can't change her, that I can only control what I allow into our lives. And right now what I'm allowing is limited and supervised and conditional on her respecting the rules I've set. And if that makes me the bad guy in her story, then I have to be okay with that too. Because my daughter isn't asking if our family is bad anymore. And that matters more than anything else. Thanks for listening. If this one hit close to home, or if you've had to make hard choices about family, I hope you know you're not alone. News stories every day if you want to keep going. Take care of yourselves.